Welcome to the Athlete Hackers Podcast. My name is Chris Schrade.
And I'm Mark Spellman. Today we have one of my former athletes and current assistant strength and conditioning coach at the University of Colorado, MT. I still affectionately know you as Church, but now I also know that you are married. MT Eisner, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thanks so much, Spellman and Chris. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I just want to mention something from a past podcast. We had Sean Crawford on a couple days ago, former Fairfield U standout, as well as a professional basketball player in Turkey. He's now part of the Jumpman 23 team and director of communications for the Knicks. One of the things that he brought up that was pretty significant to me, from being a former basketball player and also from taking the role of coaching now for little kids, is the fact that he brought up that kids today are practicing, in a skill sense, stupid moves, ridiculous moves that you will never use in a game. And it's supported by a lot of trainers out there. So listen to that podcast. There's a lot of good things in there. And remember to keep it simple. Don't need fancy stuff to get the job done. The fancy stuff you see happening in a game, the highlight reels, that comes from the basics. Practice the basics and you will create things that you've never dreamed of in the game. Don't practice them though.
On that note, I think MT, I'm pretty sure you were watching the webinar. It was Free VASP, and it was Cam Davidson from Penn State, and I told him I was going to steal it. It's keep it savagely simple. You know, master the basics before you go off and try and do something that you're not ready to do. You know, and I in fact I texted Cam and I was like, I'm stealing that, and he just wrote back, ha ha, and I was like, you know, MT, as you know, in our profession, we're a profession of thieves. So if we know that somebody's doing something at a higher level or they're getting results that we're looking to get at, we're gonna see what they're doing with their athletes. We're gonna take what we think will help our athletes, and we'll discard the stuff that we don't think will happen. But we'll get into that a little deeper. First and foremost, MT, give us your story. How does a young lady from Colorado get to Fairfield, Connecticut to play soccer?
I get asked that all the time. People are constantly like, I can't seemingly make the connection. So it's kind of a long story, not really. We'll shorten it up as much as I can. My dad actually is from the East Coast, and he went to undergrad in the state of Connecticut as well. And so growing up, we went back to the East all the time, and I loved it. I love the East Coast. I love everything it had to offer. And growing up in Colorado, I was so excited to get the heck out of Colorado. It was, you know, I think any of that high school, that, you know, teenage angst, right? Get as far away as humanly possible and whatnot. So when it came down to start really looking at universities, back when I was playing, 2004 to 2008, you got recruited your junior year of high school, right? There wasn't really much before that. So you would send out some stuff maybe your sophomore year to get interest letters going, but nothing happened before that. And every single school on my palette was all East Coast, big, you know, top 50 schools, top 25 schools. That's kind of where I wanted to be. And so, you know, kind of had that passion first off for the location, right? So my junior year of high school, I tore my ACL in, I think it was February or March of my junior year. And my dad sat down and talked to me after that. And so he played football at Yale. And my dad sat down and he said, wherever you choose to go to school, you need to be at a place that if you get injured and your career ends, or if you choose to be done, you still want to go to school there. He's like, so you really need to sit down and like think about what it is that you want out of a university. So comically, both of my sisters actually went to the University of Colorado, and having gone up and visited or whatever it might be, I knew actually automatically a big school was not where I was going to thrive at. I didn't really want a place that had actually Greek-like. I mean, I know that sounds funny. I didn't want to be, just kind of like another head, right? I wanted to be a part of something. And so after that talk with my dad, I completely adjusted my idea of getting recruited for college. And it actually was the best decision I've ever made. So I then started looking smaller because I knew that that's what I wanted. I knew I wanted to do some sort of liberal arts major. I actually majored in communication and journalism, even though I'm a strength coach. So, and I knew that's kind of what my realm, and we grew up Catholic. And so the Jesuit schools automatically start popping up, right? Because they're kind of in that wheelhouse. They're all in these great locations. And so started looking at Creighton, Marquette, and got an official visit to go out to Fairfield. And I just loved it. I absolutely fell in love with Fairfield. Came home from that recruiting visit and told my parents this is where I'm going to school at. Sure enough, got in. Sorry.
Who's your host?
Megan Moniz and Jen Chappa were the ones that took me around the most. But I'm trying to actually think who I stayed in the dorms with.
Well, I know you had fun then.
We had a good time. And so in Fairfield was fun. It was kind of exactly what I was looking for in terms of university. And then with the soccer piece of it, this is something I talk now a ton about with high school athletes and youth athletes that I get a hands on, is that for me as a woman in 2004, there were no options to be professional, right? College was it. You could go abroad. Robin Decker, a woman who I played with, is still playing abroad, which is amazing, right? But for me, I knew that college was it. College was where my career was going to be done. It was going to be the culmination of all of this work that I've gone through. And it was really important to me that I was able to go to a place where I could play all 4 years, where I could make an impact, also playing. So mid-major Division I school, obviously we went to the tournament. We had a grand old time at Fairfield, but I started and played every single game from my freshman year on. And that was important to me. That was important. I had never been on the bench. I had never not been a starter. And so for me to go and say, here it is, here's my next 4 years. I'm going to play. I'm going to have a grand old time with it. And then I'm going to be done. And so Fairfield also kind of offered me that opportunity, right? Had I gone to a larger university or a bigger program, which I was equally getting looks at, I might have redshirted my freshman year, my sophomore year. I might not have gotten onto the field until my maybe sophomore or junior year, right? Because I wasn't that good. So it was an ability for me to then kind of express myself and say, here it is. Here's my next 4 years of soccer. And when I'm done with those 4 years, we're done. We're going to call it a day. And so Fairfield really kind of gave me that opportunity as well.
You have to be, if you started every game from your freshman year to senior year, you have to be at least in the top 10 of caps all time at Fairfield.
I'm assuming I would be.
I mean,
And no injuries.
No injuries.
That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and there, you had a lot of success in those 4 years. It wasn't like you guys were bottom of the league. I mean, you were always in the semifinals or finals,
right?
Winning the conference and playing in that tournament.
Yeah, we were a successful squad. We had a fun time doing it. Yeah.
Who did you play in the NCAA tournament?
We played first round NCAA tournament. We played Duke, and we played at Yale versus Duke, and we lost. I think the final score ended up being 2-0, but it was going into halftime. It was 0-0. We had them on the ropes. I thought we were going to get that one, and we didn't. But that was a fun experience. So yeah. So
4 years, communication journalism major. And now you're assistant director of strength and conditioning for Olympic sports at Colorado. Take us through that journey. For those that are wondering how you get into strength and conditioning, this is not the traditional path.
No.
I will tell you that.
So, and here, and once again, this is another thing that I talk about with frequently. And I think the landscape is changing, especially for women now, right? But think 2004, my first exposure to a weight room was college. right? So we had lifting in high school. I loved our lifting coach. He was hilarious, but it was, it was it was an elective you could take in gym. It wasn't anything that, we ever talked about or anything that was ever presented as something we should be doing, right? And that landscape is now very different for our women coming into college. And I think it's wonderful. So when your first exposure to strength and conditioning is when you get into college, right? And you're already set in majors, you're already kind of doing this change. It's like, you don't really realize that that's a part of something you want to be a part of, right? And for me, that was especially where I was at, I came in journalism and communication. I wanted to work in publishing. Which I did. I worked in publishing for 3 years in New York City after college. Or I wanted to be in broadcast or production for news, which I did. I interned for 2 years at a news station. But ultimately, my first exposure, I kind of understand it a little bit more. And so I didn't enter being like, I want to do physiology. Student athletes or getting into SE are exposed a lot earlier to those kinds of fields. Junior year, I actually went in and talked to Spellman. I don't know if you remember this conversation, but and I was like, I'm almost done with college. I've got a year and a half left, but I like this idea of it. I never thought of working in sports. I've just always played them literally my entire life, but I never thought of actually doing it. And it was about that time where I was like, I think my head's a little bit more apt, but I'm going to follow this other passion. And Spell and I kind of talked about it a little bit here and there, but nothing serious. So I graduated from Fairfield, work in New York City, working for McGraw-Hill at a large publishing company. About 2 years into that, well, I was actually a year into that, I call Spellman up again, and I'm like, all right, we're making moves. What do I got to do? Who do I need to talk to? What are the moves I got to make to kind of get into strength and conditioning? And so we talked a little bit about that. I went to night school on top of working. So I went to night school in Brooklyn and was able to apply and get all my courses and everything scheduled. And I got into the University of Colorado Springs master's program in sports medicine with an emphasis in strength and conditioning. Fantastic program. Just wonderful, wonderful experience there. My husband proposed and I said, great, we're moving to Colorado. I'm going to grad school in Colorado and this is it. So I was super fortunate.
Somewhere around 2011, 2012?
Yes,
okay.
2011, absolutely. Yeah, and so started grad school in August of 2011 and knocked on a ton of doors to get internships at various universities, various locations. I actually went and with Paul Flusher, who's the former U.S. Olympic weightlifting coach, I went and hung out with him for 4 months at his gym and just learned weightlifting, just straight up weightlifting technique. He was still training Olympic weightlifters. He still is. He's a fantastic individual, lives in Colorado Springs. So just like gym ratted it with him, learned everything that there was to know about Olympic lifting, and then just kind of, evolved from there. UCCS opened a lot of doors in terms of practicums or internships at the NSCA, the USOC, the Air Force Academy, all places that I still have very close ties with. And then I got my kind of first step in the door at the University of Denver through Catherine Whartonby, who was the head. And she had actually just hired Matt Shaw, who is now the head at the University of Denver, who's one of my mentors, a fantastic strength coach. And I was relentless and I was like, give me a shot. So it was at 5 p.m. on Friday afternoon. I went in and I met her for 20 minutes and she's like, all right, you have to be here at 5:30 Monday morning. You need to know every single person on the basketball team's name, men's and women's. She's like, and if you don't know that by 5:30 in the morning on Monday morning, I won't see you again. And that was it. So I showed up Monday morning and sure enough, she had me do all the weigh-in. So I had to have known the players' names, everything about them, and got off on the right foot. And they let me hang there for a year and a half until I got my job up at CU. So I really backwards. My path to the profession is not what we would call standard, but I actually think that I've met a lot of strength coaches who've kind of come in through this backwards way as well.
And I think people don't understand. I mean, for all the doors that opened for you, there were probably 4 or 5 that did not.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, one of the common themes that we have going on with a lot of the podcasts that we've done is that you got to be relentless in the pursuit of what you want to achieve. You know,
Right.
you can't let one door closing on what you want to do deter you from your end goal.
Hmm.
You know, and it's you know, I always tell people, you know, obstacles and people telling you no, it shouldn't be a deterrent, but it's just a way of seeing how bad you actually want to achieve what you want to achieve.
Right.
You know, if you just give up the first time the door closes on you, you really didn't want to do it.
Right.
You know, so I just, you know, I think everybody sees where you're at now and they're like, oh, I mean, she was given this, she was given that. And I know for damn sure that wasn't the way it was, because I remember that conversation with you and I probably told you not to do it.
You did, which is what I tell my interns now. Every single time I get an intern in and I go, I was told this by my former strength coach. I'm going to tell you now, don't be a strength coach. Don't be a strength coach. And you know what? At the end of this 4-month internship, if you still want to be a strength coach, I will shake your hand and I'll give you your first recommendation if you were good. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, you look at like the staff you had at Colorado and, you know, your strength coach that you had in college, two different worlds. I mean,
Right.
you have, I believe, 3 or 4 sports that you oversee.
I only oversee 3. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, I had
glorious.
20.
Yeah.
and I had no staff.
Right.
And but I wouldn't change that for the world. Like I don't want anybody, oh, poor Mark. No, I mean, I loved having 20 sports.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
because
I think you probably came in the earlier days. I think I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think your profession has changed from when you started, as you were kind of peaking at Fairfield, to where it is now. Don't you think? I mean, back in the day, it was one strength coach taking on all those teams. Am I wrong for saying that?
no, I mean, you look at like, you know, Joe Ken, who was the strength coach for the Carolina Panthers, when he was out at Boise State, he was the one guy for 17 sports at a major Division I program.
Hmm.
So, you know, it's thankfully it's coming, it's actually evolving, thank God. Because the days of having 20 athletic trainers and having 2 strength coaches, I mean, why don't we put more resources in the strength and conditioning side so we don't need as many athletic trainers?
Now, do you think that phenomenon happened because strength and conditioning coaches said, I just, I can't handle this many teams, this many people, or the coach is saying, I want a strength and conditioning coach to concentrate on my team, more. They're splitting there's too many, their heads are going too many different ways.
I think it's a combination.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of both, but I also think there's more qualified individuals getting into the profession. So there's a deeper pool of people that can do all these different jobs.
I definitely feel it's a combination, but it's more the latter that kind of is driving it now, especially when head coaches are starting to see the differences, the positive effects. Now they want those strength coaches at practice. They want those strength coaches traveling. They want those strength coaches just to focus on their team or one other team, right? And then at that point, it's like, well, yes, now we do need the manpower. I never was a single strength coach for 20 teams, but when I started at CU, I had 6. I had 6 teams, and I actually think it's really important to have younger strength coach have multiple teams, because you really learn how to program. You really learn what you value in programming, and you really learn time management and communication big time. You have to be on top of your game. When we're looking at new strength coaches, if they've come from a program and they've only worked with 1 or 2 teams, and they'll have 3 or 4 teams that see you, I'm like, they're always like, yeah, I'm up for the challenge. And I'm like, but you are going now up rather than having your teams cut down. And it's a very different dynamic, right? You have 3 or 4 priorities that you're not used to having teams. And we operated out of 2 facilities. We now have 10. out of 3 facilities. So it's been a remarkable growth in the 6 years that I've been at CU as well.
And that's awesome. And I think, you know, for the younger strength coaches out there, if you listen to what MT said, you know, don't poo-poo working with a team because it's a lesser sport.
Oh, no, those are the fun teams to work with.
Yeah, you got to, well, they're fun until they come at you and well, we're not the women's soccer team. We're not the women's basketball team. You don't like us. No, it has nothing to do whether I like you or not. I need you to do things.
Right.
Like I'm here trying to help you be the best you can be. So
I imagine just like anything else, though, working with those teams, you're going to find something that eventually, you know, you're going to, if you get to the point where you're working with the teams that you want to, you're going to find all kinds of gems and lessons and hybrids that you can bring into that team.
Absolutely, Chris. Absolutely. Yeah.
What teams do you oversee at CU?
So I currently oversee women's lacrosse, men's and women's cross country / track, and our men's and women's alpine and Nordic ski teams. So I only have 3 teams, but I actually have over 100 athletes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And big rosters, which is fun. It's really fun. It makes it creates a different dynamic.
150.
Say that again.
I would say anywhere between 100 and 150 athletes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I imagine that ski team is like having a football team in Texas out in Colorado.
The ski team is a blast. They are just a kick in the pants. They skiers. So the majority of not the majority, our ski team is pretty split 50-50 in terms of international and American based student athletes. And so they have just crazy experiences that they bring in. And the ski world, development-wise, is a little bit like hockey in terms of you kind of have this finite time where you're selected to be professional or not. And so they have what we would call a gap year, where they're just trying to make it, you know, professionally, or they've all have skied for their national teams for their countries, and maybe they just were on like the second team rather than the first team. And so they choose to come to college before the eligibility is over to continue to develop, and then hopefully, you know, either will progress and back into that kind of first team, or you know, finish out their career in the collegiate sphere. So the athlete talent for skiers is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. They all start lifting when they're like 13, 14 years old. They all are into kind of more extreme sports than usual. They've all grown up playing soccer a ton, so their foot skills are unbelievable. So their general athletic base is so much higher than, like, an incoming freshman is so much higher than a regular incoming freshman, just because of their life experiences. So you can kind of jump in and do a lot of really fun things with the skiers right away.
That's interesting that you say that most of them come in with weightlifting experience already.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've had one skier who did not, in my entire 6 years, who did not know how to Olympic lift. And I actually kind of was like, I don't really know what to do with you. No. In fact, I told, he came from the Czech Republic, and I told the head coach who was from the Czech, or he was Czech, and he's like, what? He does not know how to Olympic lift? And he's like, I got to call his coach. He like almost like tattled on him, but he was super fast learner. You know, he, his brother plays professional tennis, and he was on the professional tennis circuit forever himself. So his skill set was so remarkable in the first place that he picked up lifts really quickly. But they all come in day one, and I'm like, do you know how to do X, Y, and Z? You know, list 5 major exercises. They're like, yep, you know, I can back squat right now 450 if you want me to. And it's just, you know, they're remarkable athletes in general, but they all have this huge base in lifting, which is really great to work with. It makes my job easier.
Well, it's like the equivalent of when Fairfield had hockey, and I would get the junior players.
Yeah.
So I'd have a 21-year-old freshman.
Right.
So they already knew the ins and out of a weight room. They've already made a lot of their dumb mistakes that an 18-year-old makes compared to a 21-year-old.
Right. But the really good thing about that too with these athletes is that they're extraordinarily coachable. You know, I think a lot of times you would think a 21 coming in with a ton of experience who hasn't lived at home for 5 years is kind of, you know, maybe going to have a chip on their shoulder of some capacity, but they're just absolutely wonderfully coachable athletes as well, in terms of they just kind of want to soak in everything because they want to be the best, because they are right there on the cusp of making their going to the Olympics or making their national team back home. So they're fun. They're a really fun group to work with. Definitely the most unique.
How's everything gone since everything got shut down? Like I mean, you have over 100 athletes, you have all these different athletes that have a variety of what they can use, what they have at their availability, and how much contact you can get with them, because
Right.
you can't if I have a full weight room, that's great, but if I don't, what am I doing?
Right.
So how's programming going for you right now?
It's kind of, we're in a little bit of a lull. No, it's been, I don't know, a disaster is not the best way to put that. And it's not been a disaster at all. But the hardest crutch is not being able to do any sort of like Zoom training check-ins or training period throughout this whole process, right? So there's no way to motivate them, like seeing them on a daily basis kind of motivation, right? So obviously I'm in group chats, we send out emails constantly, just checking in, all that kind of stuff, but we can't ask about training. We can't, be getting feedback. So we can send them programs. They can obviously offer as much feedback as they want to us. And then it kind of dies there. So, we had all these great plans of, especially with lacrosse, I was going to like set up, they have competition groups. I was going to set up their competition groups, and they were going to compete weekly for, various things throughout COVID. And then, the second week into the lockdown, the NCAA shut that down, which is, I completely understand. And it was the right move by the NCAA to do so. Especially when athletes, might not have a safe place to be. They might not have a home to go home to. They might not have proper fueling sources or anything that they might need at home. So it was the right move to go. But it just took a lot of one-on-one conversations with every single one of my athletes. What do you have availability to? What can we get you access to or not access to? And then let's go from there. And then as states start to open up, Georgia opened up in the 1st of May. And so I have 2 athletes that live in Georgia. Hey, my weight room's now open. Can you send me an actual lift, right? So then once again, getting back on the phone with them and saying, okay, what have you actually been doing? Right? Because if you've just been sitting on your couch for 6 weeks, which is fine, you just need to tell me that, right? Because now we have to be really smart and very strategic about getting you back. But if you're getting back in May and the rest of the country can't get back in July, guess what? You're still ahead. So, don't be nervous by me sending you ISO holds for like literally an entire 3-week lift, right? You can't get mad at me for that. But just in terms of trying to slow cook that. So I very positively, facilities are starting to open. We're starting to, people are allowed to go outside now, which is quite a concept, especially for my athletes that live in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. They were kind of shut down from even that kind of like access to fields for a while, right? So we had to get super creative in that. But, just honestly getting to talk with our athletes and trying to figure out, okay, what exactly are your needs? And then let's go from there. And then what do you have access to? Let's go from there. And then as things start to open up, let's just continue to just constant communication in regards to what they need.
I got to believe that, when you talk about feedback, you're in a box, because a lot of the feedback you've got to be able to read from body language. It's not something that kids are going to give up freely, or that they know, that 18 to 22-year range, they have a limited understanding sometimes of what they're doing. And you as a professional have to be able to like be with them, read them, feel them in the same area.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, one of my big staples whenever I talk with my athletes, no matter what team it is, when we're starting lifting, they always laugh at me. Be safe, be smart. That's something I always say in the facility. It's something I always say when we're starting a new program, a new phase, what it is, be safe, be smart. And it's become this big joke, but now it's like really taken hold during this whole process, right? That's like my standard comment to them. Like, I would yell at you in the weight room if you did X, Y, and Z and you're not being safe and being smart. Like, think about the exact same thing when we're kind of progressing moving forward. But that's the nice thing too, with how long I've been at CU, and I've been with I've actually had the ski team since I've been there. So 6 years with that program, with that head coach, really, really good, base of understanding of communication and stuff. And so with those athletes, I 1,000% believe them when they're telling me I have not done anything, or I've been doing a ton, like this is all my sheets, like I've, been filling things out for you and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously when you train those athletes throughout the course of the year, you just know their personalities in general. So you know who probably went home and did the work, and you know who went home and probably didn't do the work. And honestly, both sides are fine. And that's what I constantly am having communication with other people about as well, is that we have to meet the athletes where they are, no matter if we're in COVID or if we're not. If you went home for the summer, last summer, for instance, and my lacrosse girls went home and not a single one did anything, I got to meet them where they're at in August. Because if I don't, we're just going to have a ton of injuries. It's going to be a huge disaster, right? So if you didn't do anything, I'm not going to be happy. But at the same time, I'm not going to also crush you and make you do something where I think you should be, right? Where you're clearly not. So we have to always meet the athletes where they're at. And usually that's even a step below where they think they are, right? And so even if they, once again, for the summer, I'm going to give you 4 days a week because I know if I give you 4 days, you're only going to do 3. But if I give you only 3, you're only going to do 2. If I give you only 2, you're only going to do 1, right? So I was an athlete. I get it. I know what I did. So you can't play those games on me. So it's like the same kind of concept in that regard.
Yeah, I think if you dust off one of those summer programs that I sent you, you won't find too many days off.
Right.
And it's not because I didn't want you to have days off. It's just that I knew you were going to take them.
Absolutely.
So I might as well program for 5 or 6 days. And if you do it, great. When you come back, you're going to knock out the fitness test and you're going to be one of the top 5 in every test that we do. But at the same point, it's like, if I only tell you to do 3 things, you're going to do maybe 2, probably 1, some none. And then you come back to us and now it's our problem, because the head coach is looking at us going, why aren't they fit? And it's like, well, you saw the program I gave them. I mean, did you try to do the program? Because if you did the program, you'd be dead.
Right.
And I think as a lot of young coaches, they don't understand, like, if you haven't done the program that you're prescribing for the athletes that you're working with, you probably shouldn't prescribe that program.
Right.
One of the things when I was with the Buccaneers, they had like 15 different workouts that they could choose from. And we went through all 15 in like 2 days. Because the strength coach wanted us to know how they felt, like what each workout was. And, we're going through 15 full body workouts in 2 or 3 days. I mean, we were destroyed. But he wanted us to know, I think you see it now. A lot of people are trying to find the next great exercise. And I hate to tell everybody, there's not a lot of new stuff coming out as far as exercise goes. But there is, as far as monitoring and recovery coming out. What are you guys doing as far as monitoring your athletes and recovering and all that? And that was a real weird way for me to get to that topic, but that's how we got there.
You got there.
I think now you see some of the method to my madness, but I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't make mistakes, because I know I made mistakes. But part of what I tried to do with you guys as athletes is to make sure that you were the fittest, strongest team in the MAC. So there's no question on whether you could play a 90-minute game or a 120-minute game. Like, you were going to be successful because you were just going to be fitter and stronger.
Right.
And don't make the mistakes I made. Please don't do that.
Mistakes are important, though. Honestly, and it needs to be okay. It needs to be okay. I oversee 2 strength coaches and interns at CU, and I tell them all the time, like, things are going to happen, right? We're going to make mistakes. We need to be able to recover them. We need to be able to have an active solution after they happen, obviously. And but more importantly, you need to own up to it. And that's kind of my biggest thing too. Like, if you make the mistake, it's not someone else's fault, right? Just own up to it. It's not that big of a deal. Like we'll get past it. We'll move on from it. I do, but it is important. I make a lot of mistakes. Hopefully not as much anymore, but
Well, they're probably some of your teammates that I need to get in contact with and apologize.
There was an article that I think I want to have a whole podcast on at one point. Scientific America had an article a couple of weeks back that failure is a prerequisite to success, and they did a whole study on it. So you have to make mistakes. It's not always perfect. If you want to be successful, you got to fail. Simple as that.
Absolutely, Chris. Absolutely. And you know what? That's a conversation I have with my kids. They're 3 and they're 2, and I'm telling that now.
Yeah.
I'm telling them that now, so they know, so they hear that conversation there in the house, right? Because it's not, I don't need you to do something perfect. I need A, for you to do it yourself, not for me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I need B, for you to figure out the best way for you to figure that out. You know what I mean? And that always will involve failure in some capacity.
That starts with potty training.
Oh.
Lots of failures there.
It's such a nightmare. I just don't understand why men can't seem to figure out how to get everything inside the toilet. It just is like mind-boggling.
Yeah, we're distracted. We're thinking about what we're doing next.
No, but to bring this back to what Spellman initially was talking about, the different stuff that we're doing at CU. And my retort back would be, what are we not doing at CU? We've got our hands on a lot of stuff, and it's been really fun to see it evolve over the past couple of years. But we work with Kitman. We have the athlete management system, Kitman in Kitman Labs, and it's been really great to kind of have one central hub for all of our data to go into. So that's S&C, sports nutrition, athletic training, sports psychology, academics. We're all in on that system. We have dashboards that go through that. And so we can really track the whole athlete through that system, which has been really great. This is still kind of in infancy stages that we've had it at CU, but it's just, that is going to be really, really awesome when it really hits the ground for where we want it to be, right? And so on top of that, we also do, we do session RPEs, we do wellness questionnaires daily. We do, I do VBT training with Lacrosse. They're entirely VBT. We force play all of our athletes, and then we also have the VALD technologies as well. So NordBoard, force frame with that too. So we've got all our hands in a lot, which is fun. It also creates a lot of, when all the systems are coming in, it's like, all right, I've got all of these things. What exactly do I want to do with them? Just because you have technology doesn't necessarily mean that you always need to utilize it. And I think that that's what's really important to remember about it, is that I did not get into strength and conditioning to be a sports scientist. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think there's a lot of strength coaches who really dive deep into sports science, and they find out that that's what their passion is. And that's amazing. We need those strength coaches. Right. But I know that about myself. I'm not one who really wants to sit down and like figure out R and Python and all these other kinds of things. I want to use data to be able to show an actionable change that day. I want to be able to use data to be able to have a conversation with my athletes. And I want to use data to be able to show my coaches and my administration our value. And I think that those are all ways that we can utilize that the most. And so we are very fortunate at CU to have a lot of great support in that regard.
Well, it's also being on the same page with your coach as far as what the KPIs are and what you're doing with your athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
If your coach doesn't care if the athlete can squat 2.5 times their body weight, how important is it?
Right. Right.
We know that it's important, so that they're a more robust and resilient athlete. But at the same point, at what cost? I think a lot of the strength coaches, you look at like Brian Mann. And did you happen to see his presentation?
I didn't. I did not see his most recent presentation.
I think it was for the basketball symposium.
Yeah, no, I did not catch that one.
So the biggest indicator for increased performance was body composition.
Oh, 1,000% would believe that one. 1,000%.
But how many people are just looking at body comp?
Right.
And you talk about body comp, and now you're talking with, we did it at Fairfield, and it was the day that you all would usually dread because you all were whacked out about some freaking number that whatever. But, explaining it to you all that we're taking this to see where you're at. I'm not comparing MT to anybody else on the team. I'm comparing you to where you were 6 months ago.
But where's I'm going to interject here, Spellman, because where that does get tricky is that if you don't have a head coach who is following that same message, that's where it gets messy. Because I think on the S&C side, we really much we understand that holistic atmosphere. But I could speak for head coaches I've had and head coaches I've also had in the profession of S&C they have a meeting with athletes and they say, you need to look like this person. And I'm like, no, you are missing the point. You're missing the point of this conversation. And so it's also the huge education point of coaches. And that's where we've really found recently within the last year is the majority of our education is actually going to the coaches as well as it is obviously to the athletes. But the nice thing with the athletes is it gets ingrained by the upperclassmen, right? So once your upperclassmen have been under the system or under that guidance, especially with body comps, for instance, for the last 2 years, they help those freshmen, right? They come in and they lead those freshmen and help with any questions that they may have. But sitting down and talking to coaches and being like, you can't use this verbiage, or you cannot talk to an athlete and say, we need you to be like X, Y, and Z, especially when it comes to body comp, right?
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking skill level, that's different, right? It's a completely different conversation. But we always talk about coaches coming in and saying like, all right, here's this athlete and I want you to turn this athlete into this athlete. And I'm like, well, you should have recruited that athlete. You know what I mean? Like you recruited the wrong person. And so a lot of our conversation is going to coaches and saying, you cannot be approaching it this way because is the only thing the athlete's hearing.
Are the two of you talking specifically about body comp or about their how they improve themselves in certain exercises? Because I get the body comp thing, but don't you think, let's say improvement in a back squat, don't you think that's almost the same thing as a stat? If you're a basketball player, we need to improve your assist ratio. You need to make more assists, take less shots, make more assists. And an athlete needs to know that, and that's exposed. Am I reading this wrong?
No, you're reading. I'm talking about this in regards to body comp. Specifically to body comp in that regard. I will agree that there's plenty of times in the weight room. I set up my weight room so that my weakest people are staring at my strongest people, with the motivation of that's where you got to go. Right? I don't need you to squat as much as our highest squatter. I just need you to know that it's possible, right? And I need you to know that that is a trend that we're going to be moving towards. And we have an individual goal for you, and an individual weight room goal for you. And yes, there will be plenty of times, Chris, where I'll say, Beverly, I don't have an athlete named Beverly, but Beverly, like I see you being able to lift like Helen. And I like in terms of pull-ups, in terms of maxes, in terms of all that kind of stuff. Your build is similar, or your technique is similar, or whatever it might be. I see you gearing more towards Helen, like not be like Helen, but let's get a little bit more ferocious. Let's get more tenacious and let's get some confidence, right, in that weight room. And I think a lot of times too, just being able to see athletes, lift crazy weight, right? Cross country is a great example. I know I'm kind of going off a little bit on this one. But I work with our cross country program. We have 42 athletes on our cross country program. We are one of the most elite cross country programs in the nation. We have Olympians. I work with our professional, our post-collegiate athletes on that program as well. And they lift heavy. And it is terrifying for the freshmen who come in and they're seeing our top Olympians deadlift 250, women deadlifting 250. And they're like, that's never going to happen. I'm like, it will. Don't worry about it. It will.
But they've also been told. They've been told their whole
life not to lift.
But they don't need to lift,
right?
Because it's going to hurt their running,
right?
And their legs are strong from running. They don't need to lift. I'm like, okay.
Right. So then it's having that positive conversation of, you know, X, Y, and Z athlete has been injury free for, you know, 2 years or 1 year. I mean, in cross country, there's always crazy injuries because of they just run 100 miles a week, right? But she's also the fastest, or he's also the fastest. They're also an All-American. They won an NCAA champion. They won an indoor and outdoor track and field champion. There are hopeful Olympian hopefuls. I was like, if that's where you want to be, just take a look at it, right? And I think that there's to that point, Chris, there's a lot of really positives in comparing in that regard.
So, but the disconnect with the coaches, they're seeing these studies where body composition breakdown, there's a correlation with performance, and they're thinking that composition can be changed in the weight room, when really it probably has to do more with the person's genetics and a whole host of other variables that go along with it, rather than them, you know, doing something different with you guys. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
We had
I would agree.
we had an athlete at Fairfield who went to a national camp for their sport, and the head coach was like, if you lose 5 more pounds, you'll be on the team, and said it to her. That individual had to be put on a feeding tube multiple times in her life.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully now she's healthy, but you know, once again, the verbiage that you use with your athletes has power. So, I mean, I would look at the body composition based on the individual and see where they were at and where they've been and where kind of the norm is for a female Division I athlete. But once again, that norm doesn't fit everybody.
Right.
You know, and if you're going to play better at a little higher percentage body fat, so be it. You know, it's not ideal, but at the same time, you're at the school to play the sport. You're not at the sport to be between 12 and 18% body fat.
Right. So, you know, talking about body comps, we do, by we, not me, obviously, our sports dietitians at CU, they do the Isaac method. So they actually take, we call it the sum of 7. So they take, it's over, I'm going to butcher this, I know I will, but it's like 10 measurements, but they take 7 of those that they add up and it gives you a number, right? So once again, we're looking at lean muscle mass, right? So, and it's all, you know, regular calipers. And the nice thing about the data is it's worldwide, and it's primarily used with athletes. So we have data for our skiers that compares skiers here to Europe over the last 10 years. You know what I mean? So it's a huge pool of, now we've narrowed it down to elite performance. So, you know, let's take lacrosse, right? So our women's lacrosse team has to fall anywhere in their sum of 7. We have set their performance range between 60 and 90, right? So when you add up that sum of 7, you don't get a body fat percent, you get what your sum of 7 is. And so some athletes will fall anywhere, and it's a huge scale, right? 60 to 90 is a really big scale. So if we're above that or we're below that, right, we have to make some adjustments in that regard. And there will obviously be outliers on both sides. There's always going to be individuals who fall low and individuals who always fall high, right? Just kind of based on genetics. But it changes the conversation, which is really nice. And the good thing for me is when I go in and I talk to my dietitians, we can see exactly where we're gaining muscle, or maybe we have extra adipose tissue or whatever it might be. And so we can see hands-on, are my programs working? Are they getting stronger where I wanted them to get stronger? Did we see, you know, that thigh ratio decrease or whatever it might be, to kind of then really take this very good look at this athlete rather than have like a body fat number or a DEXA or whatever it might be. We do DEXAs as well. But with our runners, so to go back to kind of Spellman's point before, our runners have a very small window, and their window is a little bit more in tune to just them. And so let's take an elite male runner. They might fall somewhere between 25 and 32 on that sum of 7, which is significantly lower than that 60 to 90 we were just talking about. But we have seen almost to a T that lets one of our elite runners, if he falls below his regular point scale, we see injuries soft tissue, and then maybe some bone stress injuries and BSIs kind of creep in. Same thing if he's above that, right? Now, the whole wonderful thing about this is that your weight might not have changed the entire time we're seeing this, right? So you might come in and your weight has stayed the exact same, but your swing has been maybe a 10-point swing, a 5-point swing on your sum of 7. So we're changing your composition, but your weight's not adjusting. And I think that's where we're losing a lot of the really great conversation that can be had, especially when coaches get really nitpicky on, you need to be a certain weight. And it happens a ton in collegiate, right? And we've seen, obviously, with the stuff going on with Mary Kane and the Nike project, a lot of that, once again, this emphasis on this number, on the scale. Well, we could have an athlete for 4 years who had 4 body comps done every single year. So 16 body comps, their weight didn't change once. But we see that sum of 7, 20-point swings, 15-point swings, just based on that composition, based on when they were lifting heavy, based on when we were just running more, based on when they went home for the summer, went home for the winter break, right? So we see these swings. And once again, those conversations are, it's healthy during your off season for your number to go up. It should, right? It should go up. Your body should be recovering, because when you're in competition, you should be the most fit, right? You should be what we would say the leanest. And I hate using that phrase. Right. But when you go home and you take that recovery, yes, you should gain a little bit more adipose tissue. Yes, we should see that kind of swing, because that's what should naturally happen with the body, right? We want to see you kind of come back up, because you can't sustain that. We all know that. That's where injuries happen. You can't sustain this low number. And so having those positive conversations as well, when they come back in for fall, great, you went up a couple of points. This is exactly what we wanted to see. We wanted to see you go up a little bit, but you didn't go up too much that now we have to play a ton of catch up, right? And so once again, it's just having those positive conversations around that.
I remember when I was I had a back injury in college, and I redshirted sophomore year, and then between sophomore year and junior year. Now, I tried to gain weight from the time I was a freshman in high school, probably until I was 25 years old, and could not do it. So I remember that summer, I rehabbed and I was working out a lot, getting ready for the season. And I started the season at 215. 2 days later, I was back down to like 198, just like that.
Water weight. Well, that's the other thing that always gets me is the water. Whenever I see people working out, normal people, not athletes or wrestlers or anything of that nature, but when they're like put on the saran wrap, or they like put on the hoodies and everything, I'm like, you're just dehydrating yourself. You're not doing anything but straight up dehydrating yourself. And the minute you go take a sip of water, I was like, your body's going to say thank you, but like, you're not going to see the change that you want to change.
And to what you were saying, it's like, I don't need you to be as fit at the beginning of the season as I do need you to be as fit as possible at the end of the season.
Right.
I think what happened a lot of times with you guys, and by you guys, I mean the women's soccer program, you came back, and it's like from the day you got back to 2 weeks, we had our first game that counted. Not a scrimmage. You had 2 weeks. Right. We didn't really have time to get you in shape. Like, you have to kind of show up in some sort of shape, and then we can deal with, then we can work more soccer than, having to worry about your fitness.
Right.
Unless you're not fit, and then we got to worry about your fitness more than we got to worry about you playing.
Right.
You're not there to be fitness. You're there to play your sport.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of the accountability still comes back to the athlete.
Oh, I mean, at the end of the day, they're the one playing the sport. Right. And we all know that.
MT, in regards to the technology that you guys use, and Mark, you're going to have to fill the blanks in for me on this one. But when we were talking to Goody, I think it was when she was with the Red Stars, they were monitoring their recovery basically, and then changing their, I'm assuming their practice schedules and their strength and conditioning schedules based on that. What is that? And are you guys using it?
Do you know what they were?
My guess, I mean, you know who's there. It's Megan Young.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they were
guess,
right.
They were probably using polar heart rate monitors, but they were also probably using Omega Wave and Catapult as well.
Yeah. Omega Wave is
Because
pretty cool.
you can, if you use the Catapult and the heart rate monitors together, you're going to get the internal and external load numbers that you need. But the Omega Wave is what's really going to let you know if the athlete's recovered completely from the previous training session.
Right.
And, very simple. I believe it gives you a red, yellow, and green status. I mean, MT, you've got all the toys. I've never had any of those toys.
Yeah.
What is that?
Played
Is
with
that
ball.
based off of heart rate, like the resting heart rate in comparison to other points in time?
So this could be a long conversation. No. So I can't speak for Omega Wave. We actually had Omega Wave. We trialed it for about 6 months and didn't move forward with it. Omega Wave is pretty cool. I don't recall off the top of my head what exactly they utilize, but it is a form of it is with heart rate in some capacity.
I think it's I think it has to do with the HRV.
Yeah, it's a little HRV involved as well. Yeah. So, talking what we have, I didn't mention this. We utilize Polar Team Pro with Lacrosse as well. So once again, with Polar Team Pro, we get that GPS as well as that heart rate aspect. Interestingly enough, I'm just going to throw this out as a little bit of a tidbit. They've actually started to see a little bit more that monitoring heart rate for female athletes is not as accurate as they thought. Because depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, your heart rate is very different. And it can change over the course of that 28 to 32 day cycle period. And so actually measuring heart rate for women is not as accurate as it is for men, because men don't have the hormone fluctuations that we see with women.
You're gonna love this. We're having Sam Moore on the show next.
I am such a fangirl of Sam Moore, and her and I are actually talking next week. I have actually been all in on the menstrual cycle stuff since last fall. We're kind of starting to really unfold with it with women's lacrosse this spring, and then obviously COVID happened. So I get a chance to talk with Sam next week, and we're going to kind of discuss it a little bit more in terms of how we're going to move forward with that. But it's very fascinating. There's a lot of interesting information on it, and I'll let her do all the talking on that. But so we, load monitoring obviously, but kind of taking a look at that recovery aspect, Chris, that you were mentioning. That's really where I utilize our force plates the most, as well as VBT. Of course, session RPE is really great for that. Our wellness questionnaires are really great for that. And we can, take a look at your session RPE based on your practice load within Kitman and kind of see if we're ebbing and flowing. But taking a look at force plates and various numbers on that force plate. So we do, in season with lacrosse, they play Friday, Sunday, women's lacrosse. It's very different than men's. Everybody who doesn't know the differences, they're very different sports, and men's also typically only plays once a week. So women play Friday, Sunday. They have Monday off. So we will actually jump them on Tuesday for that recovery aspect. And then I will jump them if it's a home game again on either on Friday. If they are traveling, I will jump them on Thursday to once again see that kind of wellness piece. So basically looking at CNS is kind of what we're looking at with that force plate. VBT is great in terms of, once again, just taking a look at that recovery aspect. So I can percent things out for you, but 85% today might feel like 110%, right? Under that bar, maybe we're just not feeling great, or maybe 85% for a different female or a different man might feel like 75%, right? So VBT allows us to then ebb and flow based on how the athlete's physically feeling that day as well, which has been really great. We've seen a lot of really great successes with VBT, but it just creates a lot of extra planning, right? So knowledge with the athletes, sitting down and explaining, right? I've got 36 lacrosse athletes. We lift in a weight room with only 8 racks. And so that movement within VBT, really sitting down and telling them exactly what we're looking at. I use it with our elites, so typically our juniors and our seniors, and telling them exactly what numbers we're shooting for that day. And then it's on you, right? Then you are the one who's bumping or dropping off weight depending on how you're feeling. And it's been really great to see the athletes be able to take control of their own lift and really kind of take ownership of that. They've had some very positive feedback just in that regard. but as well as the next day, our recovery process is a lot better. And that, looking at that. And then with our, so I take our force weight data and I also overlay it with our load data for our GPS. And so we do take a look at overall trends in terms of decreasing with certain athletes, like especially there was like a certain travel period right around spring break. We always know that we get hit big time with those athletes. And then on top of that, asking where they are in their menstrual cycle gives us a really big indicator of how much they are recovering or how well they actually feel. And then we might totally take a starter who's just feeling down in the dumps. Actually, she's maybe about to start her period in 3 or 4 days, and we might not even lift her. Just kind of go through some movements, maybe do some recovery stuff. Her VBT numbers, her force plates, everything's super slow, right? So just kind of being able to pair off and take, just giving that athlete an extra day to recover. But you definitely need to have the trust with the athletes on that regard. Technology is fun because usually you can see if people are trying to pull your strings on things. Technology doesn't really lie; it just spits you out the number that they did. But if the athletes are smart enough, you can always cheat something, right? So you've got to also make sure that the athletes are understanding why we're doing it and understanding when we can push and when we can kind of back off a lot. But it's a ton of conversations. It's a ton of talking to my athletes, right? And it starts also with those wellness questionnaires. I look at them in the mornings and I'll text them right away. You were super stressed out today. What's going on? Is it something I can help you with? Do we need to get in and see someone in psychological health and performance? And if you don't want to share anything, don't share anything with me. Obviously that's totally fine. But what's the stress related to? And it's never sport. It's never sport related. And I think that's also something that's really important to always take back from that, is that they have so many other things going on in their lives that we need to respect and we need to honor, and let them be people, right? Let them be athletes, let them be college athletes, college students at the same time, but also being able to support where we can and where we can ebb and flow and in our regard too.
I got so many questions. So obviously, the study Brian Mann did with regards to football and high testing periods versus two-a-days, and the occurrence of injuries occurring higher during the high testing periods versus two-a-days.
Yeah.
Obviously, that has to do with the stress level and the questionnaire. But when you're getting all this information and all this data, are you sharing it with the coaches and having them, try and adjust what they're doing on the field? Or are you taking the information from practice and games and not only changing what you're doing in the weight room, but are you sharing it with the information with the coach so that they can better play in their practice program out? I mean, as you know, I had no technology, so
right.
My technology at Fairfield was, hey, how are you doing today? And then watching you move.
Right. So
I don't even think RPE was out at that point.
So yes and no.
Great answer.
Yeah, I have coaches who are super involved, and coaches who and with the weight room, in regards to the weight room, don't really care much what goes on, but they love what we do, right? So in terms of, we'll talk about this with lacrosse and then cross country, because they both kind of have interesting components of this. But with lacrosse, obviously we have polar. So I send out a polar report after every single practice, every single game, recaps however we need it. And we discuss a lot in regards to polar. We're kind of in the infancy stages a little bit with polar. We've had it for a year. So you need a good amount of data. You need a good amount of game data to really be able to say, all right, this is where this player consistently is at. We need to at least hit this once a week during practice. I think we've had very positive conversations with lacrosse, especially in terms of changing the way practices are ran during season. So typically she would do a really heavy hit day on Tuesday. So their off day is Monday. She would crush them on Tuesday and then kind of float into the game. And I was like, let's think about this maybe a little bit differently, especially for the athletes that play almost the entire game. They need Tuesday to be a little bit more of just rekindling the fire, right? Let's do some stuff. Let's maybe focus a little bit more on skill work. run them a little bit, sure, some up and downs, but you can't bury them. Let's have that high intensity day be on Wednesday. Let's back off a little bit on Thursday and then be ready for that game on Friday. And we had some really great success with just changing that practice schedule. I always coincide my lifting with any of my teams with what they're doing in practice. So if it's a heavy strength day on the field, right? If we're doing a lot of running, a lot of aerobic, whatever that might be, it's a strength day in the weight room. Additionally, if it's super fast, we're playing quick games, we're working on sets out on the field, we're going to be super explosive in the weight room as well. So we're kind of that concept of moving the organism in the same direction. So the same with our distance athletes. And this is where this gets so wonky for anybody who kind of steps into my weight room. Distance, they might lift one week, Tuesday, Thursday, they might lift Tuesday, Friday, they might lift Wednesday, Friday, they might lift Monday, Wednesday. It entirely depends on that meeting that we have on Monday morning. Every Monday morning, they're lifting that week changes to different days because once again, it's completely based on what they're doing on the track. And so, or out for, runs. So our distance coaches, hard days are hard days. So their hard runs, their workout days, as they would call them, are also the days we lift. So same concept, if we're working on, an LT, they're doing an LT out on the track, we're going to have a really heavy strength day in the weight room and just kind of really just crush them on that Tuesday, let's say. That Wednesday, they're going to have just the 5 miles and that's all they're going to do. Yeah.
What's LT?
Lactate threshold.
Okay.
So they're lactate threshold days. Yeah. So they those days for them, they'll usually do something like a 600 meter repeat. So they go hard for 600 meters, they get a 200 meter jog rest, and then they do like 12 of them. It's insane. It's nothing I want to be a part of. So, just really making sure that we're kind of focusing everything in that regard. Now, when we're talking about the information I share, I tell our athletes, first and foremost, your data is your data. So your data, you own your data. Yes, it comes to me. I will always be the one who sees it no matter what. I will tell you if I'm sharing it, or we'll have that conversation right from the get-go. There's some athletes, and for the most part, our data is not like that incriminating, right? It's not like athletes get in trouble from various things, but also at the same time, I want them to know that they can at any point come into my office and say, I want to see this, or I want to see what this looks like. I want to see my data for this day. Great, it's yours. You own it, right? You're just sharing it with me. In terms of wellness questionnaires, I will share with coaches, especially if they're big time red flagging in terms of something that we can actually change, right? So like this athlete still has not recovered from this game, or something else might be going on in their life that maybe they don't want to share with us, and just giving you a heads up that they are in the red and they've been in the red for 3 days. And my coaches are very responsive and very receptive to that information. And so typically we'll go on athlete to athlete basis, and I'll just red flag people that I see and share only with what I feel like might need to have an intervention with practice. I know that they're running today. Hey coach, maybe this individual should just go for a jog for the next 20 minutes. Let's make them part of that. Let's make them part of practice. Let's make them part of this conditioning so they don't feel like they're being left out, but like their load right now is not, they're not going to recover from this, and you're not going to get what you want out of them. So we do share a lot of that good information with our coaches in that regard. And so the nice thing about our commitment system, and we're not there quite yet, is that we will have dashboards for each of our coaches so that they'll be able to pull down. We can tell them what we can put in the data that we want them to see, so that they are seeing a piece of what we're seeing, but at the same time, still respecting that athlete confidentiality piece.
And that's the KIP Labs. Is that where you're getting the dashboards from? The KIP Labs?
That's our athlete management system. Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. Mark, what else you got?
Okay, with all the data you got, do you think it can be too much?
Oh, yes. I mean, absolutely. Data, and we talk about this a ton, data, right? It's technology. It's going to tell you exactly what you're asking it to show you, but it's not going to give you the human piece of it, right? At the end of the day, I share this story a lot, and this didn't happen with me. This happened with one of our strength coach is, but it's the best story to share with this. He's no longer working with women's soccer, but at the time when he was working with women's soccer, they have a test called the YBMI, that You Better Make It. That's what it's called. And it's a series of just, various, I don't even know. I can't even tell you actually. But it's different meters. It's just kind of soul crushing, honestly. And it's one of the conditioning tests that our head coach does with the athletes. And that year there were a handful of girls that stayed over the summer and trained with the strength coach and whatnot. And then it came time to run the YBMI. And the coaches were all talking, the strength coach were talking about who they thought was going to perform the best and whatnot. And so with soccer, they also do lactate threshold testing. So they have a ton of tests, right? And so one of the assistants was like, these 3 athletes are going to pass because they are in the best shape. They did the best over the summer. Their lactate numbers were the best. Data is showing us that they're going to be the ones that pass. And the strength coach goes, nope, this girl and this girl. Those are the 2 that are going to pass. And they were like, they haven't done anything. Or like, they're just kind of like, they've been in and out. They haven't been that consistent. And he was like, mark my word on it. And sure enough, those 2 women were the only 2 that passed. And they're like, well, what gives? Like, what did you know that we didn't know? And he's like, they're the 2 that will never, ever get beat. They will never lose. When push comes to shove, those are your 2 athletes who you can always count on, who will find something, find something to drag onto the field.
The strength coach understanding the mentality of the people that were involved.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And so I go back with this with technology all the time, is that we can have so many things, right, that can tell us or try to project what's going to happen in the future. But at the end of the day, you need to know the magnitude of human spirit, right? Mm-hmm. Your athletes who will go the extra mile no matter what, always on the field, on the court, whatever it might be, to win. And your athletes who, when it gets a little bit hard, when it gets a little bit adversity, they're just going to say, oh, today was hard. I think I'm done. Right? We have those. And honestly, they're both important. They're both important because they both play a very important, role on the team. And they both play a very important role in winning. But technology is never going to tell me that Helen could be in the worst shape of her life, but she'll always show up. She'll always beat everybody. She will always win. Right. So,
to your point, I think, the technology stuff, it's obviously very powerful, but it's new. We're still figuring out how it fits into place, but it's never going to replace thousands and thousands of years of human competition and, what built us in the first place.
Absolutely. And honestly, it can get just very overwhelming. There's so many numbers. There's so much to look at. And I think people get very excited by it, and they also get very anxious over it, right? Mm-hmm. And so in terms of, I could figure out all of these different correlations. We can make all these cool graphs. We could show all this cool stuff. And then there's other people who are like, I don't know what to do with any of this, right? And it can send everybody into panic, which is where it's really smart to just have a lens to focus. I'm going to take just this technology or just this number with this technology, and I'm just going to focus on what this means. Hey, and then at the end of the day, was it useful? Great. I'm going to keep moving forward with it. Did I not really find much value in it? Great. I'm actually going to stop using it. Right. And I think those are both really important. And those are conversations that we have with administrators as well. Like, that's great if we want to put money towards these technologies, but if I'm not finding any value of it, I am probably going to stop using it. Right. If you need me to continue to use this to show X, Y, and Z, we will. But if I don't find any value over seeing, Nordboard numbers, which is a lie, they're fantastic, but then I'm going to stop using it because it's a waste of my time.
Cut out the fat.
It's a waste of my time and a waste of the athlete's time, right? So it's really important to really understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that's always what coaching period comes back to. Why are you doing what you're doing? Can you justify what you're doing? Can you tell somebody in simple terms why you did it that way?
Well, no matter what your numbers are on the VBD or the force plates or whatever, you still got to play Friday night.
Yep. Yes, you do.
I don't care what Omega Wave says, and there's a reason. There's a reason most teams don't do readiness the day of games,
right?
For their athletes, because they don't want their athlete to know that number.
Mental in their head, right?
I'm not ready. I can't play. okay, well, you have to play. Sorry. You're the starter at this
Right.
position,
Right.
and the backup sucks.
I honestly, I think back all the time, I felt just trashed for 4 straight years in college, right? My body just felt just consistently just, you know,
Sorry.
no, it was you, it was our coach, it was practice, it was games, it was travel, it was probably going out too much in certain times, right? It's a mixture of it's a mixture of things that we just have to be honest about. And had we had that kind of technology now, I'm always curious as to how that would have changed and adjusted things, because man, there were literally, when I say that we did like 3 a days, 4 a days during preseason, we did. Like there were not like rules like there are rules now on various things. And drills, just you would just do the same drills over and over, and you'd run over and over, and there were no like, oh, I'm sorry that your legs hurt today.
It's amazing what you could do when you're young.
It's so true. It's so true. How much the body recovers. It's amazing.
You better find the foam rollers and better get in the ice tub in between sessions.
I know. It's
and freshmen are always looking at you like, what are those?
Just wait.
Go ask the senior.
Just
go out. They're gonna be in there right after practice.
Right.
I just want to see what the goals are for MT. Where's MT going? What's where do you see your professional career trajectory? Because I've truly loved watching your career.
Yeah, thank you. I love being at CU. I feel super blessed to have been at CU very early in my career and to still be kind of hanging up there. I would love to be a director of Olympic sports, as I think a lot of strength and conditioning coaches want. So kind of moving up in that ranks. Ultimately, I would like to get into the more administration business side of athletics. I feel that, lifting the weight room is a piece of what I do, but I think that I can add more value in a multitude of ways. And I think that probably a lot of strength coaches feel that same way as well. But I worked in business for a long time. I've had that business kind of sense, that business side. I'd like to be able to make a little bit of larger impacts, as I kind of talk about it, the larger athletic impacts. But I love the interaction with the student athletes. And so that's kind of, that's always that's a big trick, is once you kind of move a little bit into admin, right, you don't get that daily interaction with the athletes. And that's why I'm a coach, and that's why I'm still a coach. But I'd love to be a director. That's definitely where I want to go. And the great thing about it is I have extraordinary support at CU. And so being able to have those conversations with my own director, being able to have those conversations with my athletic director, right, in terms of, I want to continue to move up. I want to continue to find, my niche here in athletics, and strength and conditioning was just the way that I got started, but it's not going to be the way I end. So how's that?
Awesome.
I like it.
How can people get a hold of you or follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at MT Eisner, EISNER, and I'm also on Twitter at MT Eisner1. And then you can look me up on CU's website, mt.eisner at colorado.edu. I love talking with people. I love being able to reach out, and I feel like that's a really, really important part of our community, is being able to help whoever wants it. So if anybody wants to talk more, hey, hit me up.
Awesome. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for coming on, MT.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris and Spellman.
Former athletes, this is your payback time. This is the part that Chris loves the most. Your top 3 Coach Spellman stories.
Oh.
Your bottom 3, however you want to look at it.
So
I don't give you that question before we talk, so I can't have you thinking about this for days.
Yeah, no. So there's a lot. Here's the one that sticks out. I'll start with this one that sticks out the most, and this is one I'm still the most pissed off about. And it wasn't Spellman's fault; it was my fault. But freshman year.
Can you say that again first before?
It wasn't Spellman's fault. It was my fault. He just had to punish me. So this is also back in the days when, as strength coaches, you can still punish people, right? You can't do that now. There's no chance you could do that So I got punished quite a bit, but so freaking A, Jen Schmidt, good friend, Jen Schmidt, we were in study hall together. I had already, we had to get 8 hours of study hall. I had already eclipsed. I was at like 10 hours for that week. And she was like, I'll sign you out because we're early for practice. She's like, I'll just sign you out and we'll go down together. I'm like, okay, great. I should have signed myself out. She signed us out for 15 minutes later than we were actually in there for because she needed the extra time, not me. And so coach comes into the locker room and there was another athlete, Brett Marin, who had cheated on study hall hours by 2 hours. So coach walks by study hall, went in and checked the study hall log, and it says that Jen and I are still there and we weren't there, right? It said that Brett was still there. She wasn't there, but she had caught Brett numerous times that week. So she comes down and we just get our asses chewed, as you can imagine. Rightfully so. Once again, rightfully so. And so she asked the captains, all right, you get to choose. You either get one team running session with Spellman or these 3 girls have to do 5 days at 6 a.m. with Spellman. And so they chose that we had to do 5 days with Spellman. Well, then she put the kicker in and the captain still had to come to those 5 days. So they were still pretty pissed. So we got 6 a.m.s, 5 days of running with Spellman. And I was on the last day, it was a Friday. We were inside, we were on the treadmills. The treadmill was at 11 miles an hour. We had 30 seconds on, 30 seconds rest for a full hour. That was our day. It was our last day. And at 30 minutes in, Brett Marin just starts yelling, we're halfway there, whoa, and just start singing. And so the 3 of us just start singing for the next 30 minutes. And Spellman by the end of it was just laughing because he was like, this is ridiculous. You guys are just being absolutely ridiculous. And we're like, we're out after that one. So that was probably my
Bon Jovi to get you through.
Yeah, Bon Jovi to get me through. But this is the other one that always killed me. I went on a planned retreat with Nikki Zoller for something. I don't remember what it was. So we knew we were missing practice. We had already arranged it with Spellman. We had to make up the running for practice. We knew that it wasn't that big of a deal. We were just going to do something easy. He even told us that. So we show up 6 a.m. once again. It's a Friday morning or Thursday morning. I don't remember which one. And we walk into the weight room and he is pissed. And we're like, oh gosh, like what the heck happened? Well, there's a baseball player there and I don't even know who it is. I need to stalk him and figure out who he is. But the baseball player the day before had cursed out Spellman and then left the lift. And so he was also there that morning to get punished. And so Spellman looks at Nikki and I and he's like, sorry, you're just going to have to run with them because there's only one of me and I've got 3 of you. It's January in Connecticut. It's freezing. It's 6 a.m. So it's pitch black. We have this dirt track around the soccer field and it's about 440 yards, right? 440 meters, right? So it's longer than a true track. We had to run 16 440s in 1:15 with a 1:15 rest for this freaking kid's punishment. And we smoked his ass. He ended up being out there for like 30 more because we made every single one of them except for like the last 3. And Spellman like looked at us, he was just like, I'm sorry that I had to make you guys do that today. And I was like, over this. But my last thing that I can remember is that Spellman also didn't let us listen to music when we lifted. We never listened to music. And I can count 3 times that we ever listened to music during the whole time that we lifted. We were always terrified to ask. And the one album that he played the very first time we ever listened to music, and I still now play it because it just has that like good feeling, is the Linkin Park Jay-Z like mashup CD. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He played that on repeat that one day that we were allowed to listen to music. And that was a nice little treat that we got.
You probably had a good week of games. You probably played well. Threw you a bone.
Yeah, but it also took about 10 years for me not to think about whenever I'm running for somebody yelling at me and saying, you gotta go.
You gotta go. You gotta pick it up in the back.
You gotta go. Hey, I was never in the back.
No,
I was never in the back. I was always in the front.
Jen Schmidt's one of the players that I need to apologize to.
Oh, poor Jen Schmidt. She's doing well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much,
Chris.
MCB. Yeah,
thank you, Spellman.
That was great. Thanks for listening, everyone. You can find us at athletehackers.com, YouTube Athlete Hackers. Podcasts are on Spotify, Apple, Google, and I can't name them all, but I think 7 other podcasting sites. If you have any questions or you want to be a guest, send us an email, info@athletehackers.com. I'm Chris Schrade. Thanks for listening.
And I'm Mark Spellman. Thank you, MT. Everybody have a great day. Make the best of it. All my best. God bless. See you.
Peace.